Good afternoon. Welcome to the Finance Committee meeting. Today is February 18th, and we're discussing mostly capital investments. So I'm going to call this meeting to order. Member Jim Posh.
Here.
And Chair Gail Larson. Vice Chair Anthony Maddox may be joining us maybe joining us later. I'd like to start also at the table. Finance Director Hairston, Frank Ike from our CPA firm, member Jim Petrus, Addie Ballister's hanging out with us today, and Councilor Cobb is here, and Jessica Shantz is sitting at the table, and Director Zampt is over here, and Chief Harry is over here. So the people that are in the room that we wish to talk to today, thank you for coming. During our discussion today with the department heads, we're going to refer to the 2025 capital request document that the mayor sent us, and it's posted on the city's website, so we all have access to it. Are there any questions from the people at the table before we proceed? Good? Go ahead.
If we have questions while the directors are speaking, is it okay for us to raise our hands at that point?
Yes.
Okay.
I have one question, Director Hairston, about this spreadsheet.
Okay.
Here's the mayor now. Mayor, I saved a seat for you.
Thank you kindly. I may have to run downstairs and grab my computer though. You can see I haven't been able to actually eat lunch yet, so maybe I'll do that, but probably. Actually, you know what? Let me run and get my computer, but please feel free to give me that.
All right. I was gonna ask about this section of this report that we have for the capital request. If all of these funds already have enough balances in them to absorb these expenses, will that mean we will not need to do any transferring in order to make this happen?
That's a question that I believe the mayor's gonna have to answer.
Okay. All right. To start us out, Interim Director Shantz, the capital request on this list for audio video equipment for $35,000 and $35 for Access Cleveland Heights software. Does the audio video equipment expenditure include any upgrades to the sound system in this room?
It's exclusively, to my understanding, for the audio-visual equipment in this room, the speakers and 2 additional cameras.
I am so glad to hear that because
Yeah.
it's been difficult when people are on Zoom and it's been difficult for people listening to the recording.
Yeah.
So thank you.
Now, I should say, and I know, I'm not sure if this is set in stone, the new estimate for that equipment is $45,000.
Okay. So is the mayor gonna change that on here?
Potentially, yes. I need to follow up with him,
Okay.
but that's the latest number.
He said 45,000 for the audio visual.
This room specifically.
And will that software, will we see enhancements to the people who interface with it, as we're interfacing as citizens, or is it in the backside of the software, just to update it and?
Yeah, I believe it's on the back end. It'll be 2 additional cameras and additional microphone coverage. So I would imagine that they would experience, viewers would experience a higher quality imagery and sound.
I'm also looking at the Access Cleveland Heights software that you're upgrading. For the people to complain.
Yes, and hopefully tell us when we're doing a good job.
Okay, so.
That is under computer software. That's a $35,000 request. That covers both the city's website subscription and what's called C-Click Fix.
So it's kind of an annual expense then.
It's an annual expense.
Councilor Posh?
Maybe that answers one of my questions. What I'm trying to do is reconcile between, last year's budget, this year's budget, mostly the capital items. And there was $35,000 for audio and visual last year and Access Cleveland last year. And it looks like it's carrying over this year, but maybe it's an annual charge.
Yes. So our Civic Plus, which is our website, serves an annual fee.
Right.
An annual fee, yeah.
Okay. And that's Access Cleveland.
And that includes the Access to Heights, what's called a customer relationship management software program.
Yeah.
That includes that.
So the audio and visual that was for 2024, that's the hardware for this one.
I understand, I can confirm that with Steve Barker, who manages it, but I understand that that's the cost of maintenance.
Maintenance for it.
Let me talk to him before I confirm, because I wasn't here for
Okay.
and maybe Mayor, you can fill in the cost of the capital, the Fund 3004 cost of audio visual for $35,000 that was approved last year.
So I think normally what occurs, and you'll see this if you go back in previous years, there is basically sort of a standing approximately similar amount for this sort of capital. And the idea is that the local programming fund, I think, is where primarily it comes from. But there, I could be misremembering the exact fund, I'd have to take a look. But it is a standing sort of, I think, 35,000 that we generally tend to budget for any potential need for mainly Steve Barker's improvements to our audiovisual systems. So this might be replacement of items, improvement of various items related to the streaming, filming. So it could be cameras, it could be microphones, it could be additional units to make it easier and more convenient to stream the meetings or other events. But that's general. I think probably Mr. Barker could explain it a bit more effectively. But that's my general understanding of the addition of that capital, which is sort of more continuous. I think you might see it in the 2024 budget book too. You can take a look.
So it's a small amount, but I'm just trying to get my hands on how this city likes to do its budgeting. And if it's something that can be in on a regular basis, that's fine, but I look at it as a capital item, something that's a one-time purchase, it's not something that's ongoing.
Well,
Unless it's like unless it's a physical thing.
I'll push back a little bit on that, and the only reason why, like for instance, if you take a look at Shaker Heights, for instance, in their capital budget for 2025, they have about $150,000 for police vehicles. Now, they're in a different position than we are because we are coming back from a long history of neglect and disinvestment in our capital, in our equipment, in our vehicles, in our facilities. And so we're playing catch up. And luckily, I guess, back in 2015, we put that tax increase on the ballot, the income tax increase on the ballot, and we have been able to create a relatively large reserve of cash to pay for certain things without going out for debt. And we're at that point. But the reason why I bring up that $150,000 that Shaker Heights is budgeting for police vehicles is because they've got sort of a continuing annual replacement of vehicles that they're working from. And so you'll see if you take a look, they don't even tell you how many vehicles they're going to purchase with that $150,000. It's just that's their annual sort of replacement cost. This is sort of similar, and I think specifically when it comes to that $35,000, that is not reflective of the Access Cleveland Heights funding, which is the other section of that. But like the audio and video equipment is sort of a standing $35,000 that we've taken a look at. And you see it in the capital request for the year previous as well. And we don't always use it all, but it's there in order to allow Mr. Barker to do his job a little bit easier and have some capital present for him to use in order to update, refresh the technology as more efficient things come become available. If there is potentially a move to change, for instance, the interface that we use to broadcast these meetings, that might be something that we would use this capital improvement to do, whether it be creating an interface for like tablet use so that it doesn't have to be Mr. Barker running the audiovisual and have a different kind of thing. That's sort of the direction that we're heading. But that capital is just refreshing, getting new equipment. Camera technology from 5 years ago is dramatically different than it is today. And it will continue to change. And so that's sort of where we are with that. If you need Mr. Barker to provide more explanation about what this funding has been used for in the past and what he anticipates it being used for, that's fine. I don't have a problem with that. I mean, that could be useful.
No, I think I'm delighted to hear that we're talking about enhancing the audio pickup in this room, because it's been difficult for people on Zoom and watching YouTube. So that's and Director Shantz had just said that we were going to increase that to 45,000.
So you'll see, I made some changes, and you can take a look at the website and the capital request on the webpage. If you go to the mayor's webpage and 2025 budget information at the bottom, you've got that 2025 capital expense request. And the original 35,000 and 35,000 for cable TV admin, and that's coming out of Fund 214. Again, this is sort of indicating the changes over time, so that is in the current budget. I did not change that current, but I did provide an additional, let's see, Fund 214, an additional $10,000
Okay.
for that in Fund 214 to take the total Fund 214 additional, total would be $80,000 for community services.
The Fund 214 is not on your box list at the end.
It's on the website. And the
Okay.
reason why it isn't in the box is because until the addition of that $10,000, there was no additional, there was only current.
Okay,
So underneath that box, there is the section that says community services. And on the document that you have, it should probably say 70,000. On the current document that is now on the website, it says 80,000. And that's the addition of that 10,000.
thank you. Before we go on, I would like to ask you, these funds have unencumbered balances at the end of 2024, I'm assuming.
Correct.
And so you have, in order to provide for all that we're going to be talking about today, we do not have to dip into the unencumbered funds in the general fund 101.
Correct.
All right, thank you.
So all of the additional capital is out of funds that are not the general fund.
Yeah.
And that was important for, my purposes. I think we should, be careful with our general fund. But the other funds are expressly for these purposes as well. So, and we have relatively high amounts of reserve, if you can call it reserve, relatively high balances that we otherwise would not be able to use if we were only focused on matching the revenue in those funds.
So we'll also see, I would expect on the first, in January, when we get the first financial statement, we will see those encumbered funds show up on that report under the encumbered funds column, or encumbered column.
I mean, I think, the sort of, it's a, okay. When we budget, so the 35,000, for instance, for either access, whatever, the capital that's here, until we get to a point where we are going to be putting a PO in. Let's say, for instance, there is additional video processing equipment that Mr. Barker would like to purchase, he would have to put in a PO for that. And once that PO is put in, at that point, those funds would be encumbered,
Okay,
but they would not be encumbered just from budgeting the capital.
okay.
Councilwoman Lawrence.
Yes,
Thank you.
Counselor Pasha.
I found the document that you placed on your webpage, and I noticed that both the 35,000 and the 10,000 have the same description, audio video equipment. So just for clarification, it's representative of the same bucket, things that Steve may, Mr. Barker may request for upgrades, replacements, et cetera, and that, it really could be on one line. Is that correct?
Yeah, I mean, what we were trying to do, I think, was provide a little bit more detail and break out that Access Cleveland Heights software cost to make sure, but it's all coming out of Fund 214 and it's all capital expenditure.
Okay, yeah, so there is a separate line for Access Cleveland Heights software,
Yep.
but then there are two for audio video equipment out of 214, and I just wanted to make sure that I was understanding correctly that it really is just a bucket for any replacements, things like that he may see. But one other question, are there any other changes on this document, just so that we could be aware of them, or is that the only one?
Well, one way to check, if you take a look at the total additional capital that's on the sheet that you have in front of you, we can take a look at what the difference is between what's on the website currently and what is on that printout that you have, Councilor Larson. Do you have the total?
Yeah.
And what is that total that you have in front of you
Prior to
prior to the change? Yeah.
13,617,529.
Okay, so what, 529?
So it looks like it's just a 10,000.
629.
629, yeah, so that 10,000 was the only change that was made. I just wanted to double check.
We always ask this question, and I'm pretty sure Mayor Saren's tired of having us ask it of your department, if you're considering doing any welcome packets in the future, like we used to provide.
I've heard told of the golden age when the department was full of 25 people.
Right.
There were people who I guess worked part-time just to welcome people to the city.
Yeah.
It has been a conversation. I wouldn't say that we've talked about how we would finance that or what would go in that. I can say for sure that we are in active conversation about upping the amount of, to put it in the modern parlance, swag, to have more accoutrement that is Cleveland Heights, has our updated logo on it that we can distribute to new, potentially new homeowners, guests, distinguished persons who come to our space, that we have it readily available, that I think has been lacking. That might segue nicely into a conversation about welcome packets for residents. I think it's also fair to say that so much of that can happen online now. To save on printing costs, to be a little bit more environmental. There's a lot that we could do to provide a kind of digital packet that we could communicate out with to realtors and community, point people. So we're definitely in conversation about that. In communications, we think it's important that people know where to access information when they move here to rent or buy.
Absolutely. Yes, go ahead.
So I've got two questions. One of them is regarding the Focus magazine. And it looks like you have a fall-winter version out that just came off the presses. I think I'm getting the right. Is it fall-winter?
It's winter-spring.
Winter-spring.
Yes.
So, and it's the full 60-some pages as opposed to the half version. What's your plan this year on additional? Are you going to accelerate the number of focuses? Is it still 4 a year? How does that?
That's changed and relatively recently. The idea that the Focus, an original piece of the Focus and its primary purpose at a certain point was it was a publication of Parks and Rec, basically, which provided, just here's some schedules, here's some ads. And we wanted to make sure that our community is seeing some features about some things that might be interesting to some of them. learn more about our city, both when it comes to the things that we have available to us and things that we're doing, things that people might not have an understanding of. And also make sure that we don't lose the utility of having those scheduled classes and activities and that kind of thing. And through conversation with Parks and Recreation, we came to the realization that the historic schedule for the Focus is kind of off. And so what we're trying to do is move our scheduling, and there's been some hiccups in terms of getting things out, but sort of move our schedule back so that we are a bit taking advantage a bit better of the scheduling of these classes and providing this information. Many people are still not on the internet, or even if they are, so many things get filtered and algorithmed that many times people don't see what's happening in our community. And so making sure that we have something that goes to everybody is important. But the schedule was changed for the primary reason of being a little bit more adherent to the needs of scheduling those classes. And you can give a little bit more information about how that came to be.
Sure. So we will now make sure that we're getting at 4 focuses. I want to say as an English major foci, but that's not correct in terms of a year. And we changed it now. The designation used to be just, I think, like winter, spring, or now it's going to be winter/spring, spring/summer, et cetera, so that it better aligns with the registration schedule of the Parks and Rec department.
Okay.
So we spoke with the Parks and Rec staff and asked for that to, according to them, what the ideal timeframe would be, and they gave it to us. And so we're working really hard to adhere to it. Again, we've had a couple hiccups, but we're getting better, for sure.
And I think the change at the outset, the change at the outset also meant that, from converting from the old scheduling
Right.
to the new scheduling meant that we had a very tight turnaround on
Very
that
tight turnaround.
first one, certainly. And so moving forward, I think it'll get easier and easier for us to meet those deadlines. But yes, 4, and with more attention to the registration deadlines.
So I'm more concerned about the budget aspect of it. So when I ask if you're gonna expand it, is it like, certainly not 5, is it gonna be the 60-some pages? Because I would imagine that's a big print run compared to the much bigger print run than the 30.
It's true, although working with a printer, it's more cost effective to do it in certain page counts, and 68 happens to be one of them.
Okay.
That's why we
Probably
chose
the kind of
68.
price to have.
Yeah, because if we have a certain amount of content, it behooves us, if it's gonna be, say, more than 50, it behooves us to bump it up to 68 because it's more cost effective.
Are they all gonna be 68?
That's the plan right now, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is there a budget impact with that?
A budget impact?
Yeah.
According to our, current numbers, we should be able to manage it.
Okay.
And I think if we ever get to a point where we're concerned about that, and I don't think that we will, then there will be one of 2 options that we'll take. The first is value engineering, and the second is coming to council to request an additional appropriation for additional printing and postage. I don't foresee that as a likely possibility, but it's always on the table.
I have some more questions, but
We're supposed to move
Go-
on
go.
to other folks, 2 directors, so,
can I ask one more then quickly?
Yes.
Because it's relevant to, so the Public Safety Committee, we met about 2 weeks ago, maybe 3 weeks ago, and we talked about one of the surveys that Shaker did. And noticed that there hasn't been a comprehensive citywide survey that was conducted really since 2020. And before that, it was pretty much done on every 2 years. And when you go back and look at it, it's a really good measuring tool to see, how's the city doing from the taker of the survey answer's perspective. Is there any plan to do a survey? Is that something that would have to be budgeted?
Well, yeah, we would have to budget for that, or at the very least, we would have to decide that some budgeted money is going to be reallocated for that. I think at this point, I don't have any opposition to doing sort of a citywide satisfaction survey. I also don't know that that 2025 is the year for that, for a variety of reasons, and I'll be blunt. I think that it's important for us to provide, and I think we will be doing some surveying, not quite in the same scientific way that those previous surveys were done, but information gathering. But I do have some concerns about budgeting and engaging in a citywide satisfaction survey, primarily because it's an election year for 4 council members and the mayor. And, I would hate for people to get the wrong impression and think that we're doing some sort of satisfaction survey in an election year so that any one of the 5 of us, or even those of you who are not up for reelection, will be using it for some sort of political purpose. So, but I do think that it's important to get back to that. But again, I also don't want to participate in a satisfaction survey process, as we're focused on some really, really important, work like getting a budget passed and those sorts of things. I think we've still got enough of the obvious work to do. And the obvious, we talk about playing catch up. Got $18 million of Leopardo work to do this year. We've got hopefully around $13 or $14 million of capital that we're looking at. There's a lot of work that we need to do that I don't think requires a satisfaction survey for us to know we need to do it. So there's that. But I, like I said, not opposed to it, in favor of it. I think that we should get back to it. I think maybe that should be a 2026 thing, though.
Could I add one very quick addition to that, which is to say, it's not a formal survey, but comms and expanding its social media channels and working with the MAC is becoming more nimble at gathering and assessing the kind of feedback that we're getting directly and immediately from the community. We're having a better sense even of the sorts of information that we put out that residents find helpful and useful. I know that's not the same thing as a satisfaction survey, but it is an indirect way of understanding if we're directly meeting the needs of constituents through our communications channels. And I'd be happy with, the mayor's, approval to share some of that information with council, some of the feedback that we're getting and the numbers that we're getting through our communications channels.
Okay, any other questions for community relations? Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon.
Thank you.
And we've got Chief Harry join us, please. Our next agenda item is to talk about the capital request for the fire department. And so Chief Harry is representing the fire department. Good afternoon, sir. Okay, with everybody's permission, I'm gonna go ahead and ask a few questions and then I'll open it up. The current request for the new fire truck or the lease for $198,791. Is that cost effective to continue to do lease for that particular vehicle?
That lease actually is not for a new vehicle. That's been living in the budget for
Ever?
some years now.
Okay.
I'm not sure when are we scheduled for that to be? That was something that was purchased long before my tenure.
Okay, all right. I'm so happy to see we're funding the firehouse kitchens.
Thank you.
And we'll hope for updates on those projects. And the new fire engine, as well as new vehicles for the fire chief and new commander vehicle. On this report that the mayor generated, there's $80,000. I was trying to compare it to the one we got previous to the end of December. And it asked for $80,000 for the commander vehicle. Is that the same as the utility truck that was removed from the 2024 budget?
They're kind of one and the same.
Okay,
So our replacement plan was to replace the incident commander vehicle. And then the current incident commander vehicle would become the utility truck,
Okay,
because we could put the plow on it and it can cart tools and equipment and people to and from emergency scenes and training and things like that.
perfect. Because I was gonna ask if the vehicles we're replacing are gonna be traded in or retained, so that answers my question. Thank you. An item that was budgeted for 2024 but removed was $216,397 for an ambulance re-chassis that was approved in 2022 but never encumbered. Do you still need it?
Prior to the closeout of the budget, I had a lot of things in the works. And we were able to finally get everything squared away with contracts and the law and the manufacturers and such, and that was all taken care of.
Okay,
So we're square on that.
all right. So the 2024 budget covered you for that,
Mm-hmm.
right? Okay. Counselor Posh, any questions?
I'm curious if the fire truck lease has always been in the budget, where have we been spending that money? And some of these questions I don't necessarily need an answer now for.
What do you mean? I'm sorry.
For the lease that has always been in,
That's for a vehicle that we've had for some years now, and I'm not sure how they structured the payments, but that's just always been a running thing in the budget. It's not for anything new. That vehicle came, I wanna say in 2013 or 15 or somewhere in that ballpark. We should probably be pretty close to the end of the payment on that.
We can take a look at the debt schedule on that and get back to you.
Yeah.
well, it's nearly $200,000 payment, so I'm just curious to see really what it is and if it's just,
It's just finalizing the purchase. I don't think they wanted to pay for everything up front on that particular vehicle. I don't know, that was some years ago. And I think that's just the way they laid out the payments, that every year there would be some, I don't know if it's the same dollar amount every year. We'd have to look at the.
well, if someone could just get back to us and let us know.
Sure.
It's for, when does that end?
Okay.
Either way, it is an obligation that we have.
Oh, that's what I'm getting at.
Yeah.
So,
Anything else, Mr. Posh? Counselor Posh?
No.
Mr. Petrus?
Thank you. I think that a lot of council members were surprised that some of the items that were allocated for 2024 weren't completed or purchased. And so we want to make sure that the firefighters have every single thing that you need when you need it. And so if there is any sort of impediment that you become aware of, we're probably unaware of it. So please don't hesitate to let us know if there's anything that we can do to support you. The mayor talked about maybe some money for, I think, a locker room renovation, if I remember correctly. Maybe you mentioned
No, actually,
preliminary
so a couple things.
in
One,
addition to the kitchens.
there's a locker room renovation in police.
Right,
That is in the
yeah.
capital budget. I have been in conversation with fire about how best to structure an update to their sort of workout
Yeah, that's,
and facilities. The fire stations are not terribly well designed for that in a modern circumstance. And so there's a little bit of work that needs to be done, but we're working with the fire union to take a look at exactly what we can do in the short term and then what we can do in the long term relative to that improvement over there. But we don't have a particular estimate yet about what that's gonna look like. But I anticipate that we'll be sorting that out at some point through this year with an expectation of, making something happen either this year if possible or next year if not possible this year.
so if it's the case that in May, June, you realize that you have a number for something that you'd like to do, I would be happy. I am just speaking for myself, not anyone else, but I'd be happy to support that sort of budget adjustment. So anything that you need, just let us know.
It's very comforting. Most of our issues in the past few years anyway have been supply and manufacturing issues.
Okay.
Those things tend to drag and drag and drag, and like with the vehicles, catching those things up. We were able to square away almost all of that at the end of last budget cycle. if there's anything that pops up. I know the union's been asking about a couple tools and toys, and
Okay.
we'll certainly discuss those things.
Okay, great.
Sure.
Thank you for being here.
Counselor
My
Bosch?
pleasure.
So, do I recall correctly that there was some issue with a generator in one of your buildings?
Yes,
And does that fall underneath your department or does it fall underneath someplace else?
no, I did have a list of things that properties has to square away, and as a matter of fact, we have a handful of things. And I was gonna, I think last budget, when we cycled some of that stuff through, or I'm sorry, when we first put the budgets through, I did have a list of requests for properties to take care of. The generator was one. We do have a functioning generator. It's very old. It was a great generator. It was there since they built the stations. Very large, it could power the whole station and all of our tools and toys. It did fail during a winter storm last winter for, I think we lost power in the neighborhood for about 3 days. We ended up bringing in some portable generators and did what we had to do. It's something that they definitely need to take care of. Sure.
I'm wondering, I thought when I took my tour with Leopardo
Mhm.
that they were looking at that as part of their efficiency upgrade.
I know that properties wants to replace it. The problem is the generator, they can't make parts for it anymore. It is working now, and I don't think they expect for it to break down again when it's called upon, but it's something that they have to look at into the future. I don't know if that was part of Leopardo. I've had a lot of meetings with them and orchestrating things, but the generator wasn't discussed with me. You know, that was.
I don't have my
Properties.
folder with me, so I'm
Yeah.
sorry about that, but I know we talked about the
I'd be glad
incident,
to sit down with them and explain the whole thing, but, you know,
because that could be efficiency as well,
sure,
right?
it's critical.
Yes, yes. Can't have you losing power over there. Counselor Cobb, do you have any questions?
I do not. Thank you, Chief.
My pleasure.
Mr. Ike, do you have any questions?
Not right now. I have a question for the council members. Do you have any concerns with any of the specific capital requests that are currently on the list?
I do not.
For fire.
Well, generally, but for fire specifically as we're sitting here with the chief.
I could explain anything you like.
For fire, no, I have no questions. For others, I mean, they're just very short descriptions, so these conversations are helpful and will be an opportunity for us to ask questions. It's not to say that later, maybe in another presentation, something might be worth discussing, but as of fire, I have no concerns.
Same here.
So then a follow-up question to that is, would council members who are currently within the sound of my voice be willing to take a look through this list? And, you know, there are potential capital requests that you are A-okay with as currently described. There are capital requests that you are absolutely not okay with. And then, you know, some that I guess maybe require more description or discussion, sort of a 3-category kind of system that council members could provide to the administration so that we have an understanding about what people's no-go, go, and maybe.
Counselor Bosch?
Okay, so I need to take a step back and answer your first question.
Okay.
I mean, and it sort of morphs into what you're just asking us for right now. I mean, these are requests that you in good faith have given to council that believe need to have happened. And honestly, I don't have any problem with that. I don't question any of that. You know, what I'm looking at is basically a $13.6 million bottom line number.
Yes.
And where does that fit into the budget? I mean, and this is where it's sort of like what comes first, the cart or the horse. I mean, we really need financial statements, or at least I need financial statements. I can't speak for everybody, to really see where this all fits in and to see how this request fits in with the fund balances and everything. And, you know, I almost need to, you know, go back and relook at the budget book and look at everything from a holistic picture as opposed to pieces, parts here and there. So I personally maybe $13 million is fine. You know, I might look at the financial statements and I may say, oh my God, we can't possibly afford 13 million, but that it needs to be closer to 5. You know, then what happens at that point? So, and this is where I think my peers would have to come in and say, well, we can really only afford 5 this year. I'm just pulling a number out of thin air. You know, what happens then? So then there's gonna have to be some prioritization of what has to happen. So if council's only gonna give the administration X amount of dollars, it really kind of comes up to you, I think you and your staff to figure out how all that gets. In my opinion, it's up to you and your staff to figure out, okay, you know, how are we gonna get to that number? We may come back to you and say, we have 20 million, because we know that this number is short, this 13 million. There's many millions of dollars of additional capital that should have been spent over the years that hasn't. Or wasn't for whatever particular reason. It may need to be larger than that. But I mean, until we have the big picture, which hopefully we're gonna get on the 24th, you know, I really can't comment on this. I mean, I can't give you a priority.
Let me rephrase my question then. What I'm asking for is for councils or council members, individual members, thoughts about each individual project, absent the consideration of the other projects on the list. I'm looking for council members' objection, acceptance of these projects. Like, for instance, there might be somebody who believes that we do not need a new hot box truck for, you know, asphalt patching. So I'm thinking about specifically the project itself, not necessarily the cost or prioritizing, but I'm wondering if any council members have any objection to any of the expenditures, just sort of almost philosophically, but really when it comes to the need for any particular expenditure as a standalone consideration. So if there's anything on this list that you think does not need to be done, you know, then I'd like to know if there's anybody who has that kind of opposition to a particular project. Sort of in concept, the project, not the cost of the project.
And I'll get to you, Councilor Petrus. That's my approach to these 2 meetings today and tomorrow, is I want us to use this report that you gave us with those individual line items. And I'm asking my questions based on this list. And I actually do not have any objection to any of them. I just want more information.
Yeah.
So that's where I'm at this point. Councilor Petrus?
Okay.
I'm the same way. The current ones, I think we've heard about most of them. The additionals on their face, I don't have any issue with them, but I would like some details about them.
I mean, and go ahead.
And it can just be, you know, a brief detail. I don't want to have to send an email and highlight the ones that I have objection to. I just like to hear, this is what we're purchasing, this is why it's needed.
I think it would also be helpful to know which of these were budgeted in '24, not completed, or are being re-requested for '25. That's something that council has asked for a number of times. So during these conversations, we don't necessarily need a separate report. Even just pointing out which of these things were not completed in '24 and we'd like money for again in '25 would be helpful.
Can I, and this is something that I've had some difficulty understanding. And this might not be the appropriate time to help me understand, but I sincerely have a question about it. What would that information tell you about the 2025 budget?
It would inform me about things that were planned for '24,
Yeah.
were not completed, and are being re-requested for '25, so that I can know which things previously were planned for and not completed, and I may be able to ask for throughout this year. I think most council members were surprised that apparently there were a large number of things that were not completed in '24. We did not hear anything throughout the year, and so being able to ask midway through the year, hey, are we still on track for doing this thing, I think increases the likelihood of those things getting done. So that's speaking for myself, why I would be interested in knowing. And again, I'm not the only one who was asked for that, but it's been requested multiple times, so.
This is more along the lines, and this is where my confusion comes in. I apologize for needing this clarification. We have a list of requested capital improvement projects in front of us right now. And each one of these, some of them are purchases, some of them are plans, some of them are projects. Each one of these is documented as a request for 2025.
Okay.
Whether or not it was something like a police locker room renovation, for instance, which we were not able to get over the finish line last year. So that's an example of a project that we didn't complete last year, and now we are requesting funds to complete that project. It's on the list for this year.
Okay.
Whether or not it was on the list for last year, the capability of the council to look at this 2025 list and make inquiries, I would say regularly, would be fine. At the Municipal Services Committee level is where I would anticipate those sorts of updates happening. Moving forward throughout 2025, whether or not something was in the budget and not completed in 2024 does not reduce council's ability to ask about any of the things that are on this capital request list.
So I think that it would be helpful, speaking for myself, to have it. I'm requesting that we receive it. It's been requested multiple times by multiple council members, and so I hope that we'll be able to receive that information.
Okay.
It is easily approached because we did do that journal entry. We did authorize that removal of those particular items. I've tracked them, and I've also cross-referenced them to this list that you updated us with. But it's out there. If, just even a check off, Mayor, if you could just say this is here, this is here, this is not on 2025.
That would be sufficient. That would be great.
All right. Counselor Posh.
So this is really important to me. And I use the example of the fire truck. The fire truck wasn't spent it wasn't used last year. Okay, it was not purchased, it was used a lot last year. Sorry, it was not, a new one was not purchased last year, okay?
As of our last conversation, it wasn't. As of this conversation, it is.
Yes, nice.
So we got that in right before the budget closed out. We finally got them to hash out all the contracts.
So there was a $1 million fire truck that was on the budget for last year that was not purchased.
That's the
There
one.
was an ambulance that was refitted, which I believe you were referring to.
That was the re-chassis.
The re-chassis.
That also went through late.
So this 1.140,
Yes. And I mean, we would need to confirm that with Director Hairston. That was put through as he was probably actually, I don't even know that he stepped in the building yet. It's been a whirlwind. I think we got that through with law. Director Hairston was either here for a day or hadn't come in for a day yet, but was about to.
so this might be vestigial,
It might,
this request, this might be,
yes.
okay. Well,
That
there
might
you
be
go,
no.
you just saved us $1 million. Not that we would have spent it, if we already had, but.
So you purchased the fire truck already, in which budget did that come out?
If it's definitely gone through.
We'll have to check.
We put all the paperwork through and it was done before they closed out the budget. I don't know where it sits now.
So we can take a look at that and get back to you. But the list of requests from the original, it was, almost $34 million. And a lot of that you'll find, let's see. I suppose you all have access to this. Some of that you'll find in the paving projects and sewer work. But
So
again, though, I think the question remains, if council determines to fund some or all of these requests for 2025. And so far, we got no funding for this, but if council determines to fund any of these projects, council having, and individual council members, I think, sort of own and share a responsibility of keeping track of the ones that they are most interested in from this list and requesting sort of updates and information about those, any or all of the capital projects that we have requested funding for. And this can be on a frequency that council determines. It's probably useful to set up a system of committee meetings where capital projects are discussed. And like I said, I think probably municipal services would be the primary place for that, but there might be some other departments, depending on the capital request, to move forward.
Can we just take a step back?
Sure.
Because I'm still talking about the question, I'm still trying to answer your question on why you wanted to know about the 2024 capital budgets, what were done, what wasn't done, and wasn't. Which was what done, which got done, and what didn't get done.
Yeah.
And I was referring to the fire truck because from my perspective right now, the fire truck is in the 2025 budget and it was also in the 2024 budget. And to answer your question, that's $1 million expense. It could be whatever amount it is, but it's approximately $1 million expense. If you didn't spend the money last year, I'm much more inclined, and I kind of assume it didn't roll over, it wasn't encumbered, but
Nothing
it's
rolls
sitting.
over,
It's
unless it's encumbered.
I'm not gonna fight about the use of the word. The issue here is it's sitting in a fund balance someplace that was never used last year. I'm much more inclined to spend that money this year if I knew it was just sitting out there, not touched, unused budget item from last year. Okay, so I'm more inclined to fund that this year, knowing it was already purchased before and it's already sitting in a fund. It wasn't put in there as savings.
I can follow up on that tomorrow with Director Hairston and try to get that to you as soon as we can figure out if it was approved.
Actually went through.
Yeah, but this is bigger than just the fire truck, okay? And it kind of goes back to what Council Member Petrus mentioned. There's other capital items that were set to be utilized, purchased last year that didn't get done. And there's probably good reason why they didn't get done. I mean, I don't think anybody's is arguing about whether it got done or not or why it didn't get done, but it didn't get done.
Right.
So it's sitting in a fund. Hopefully it wasn't reallocated with some kind of appropriation. I'm more inclined to fund that this year because those monies are already sitting in some fund that it was going to be funded. That's why I need to know about these particular items, unless if I don't know about it, I'm going to assume it's a new expense.
If I may, in terms of those items that were removed that we actually voted on, this is the list, okay? We voted to remove from 2024 budget all of these. Police locker rooms for $275,000, replace the fire hall kitchens 1 and 2. We removed $50,000, but as a result of the discussion, we increased that in the 2025 line item. We removed the utility truck for $80,000, which Chief Harry has already explained is just called it something a little different on the 2025 budget. We removed the fire engine, the $1,080,000 fire engine. We removed the transfer station and removed the ambulance re-chassis. So I would like to know if that re-chassis was done in 2024, that would be helpful as well. But those are the only items that were on that I've been tracking, Councilor Petrus. So if you have any others. I also like the idea, Mayor Sarin, since we don't necessarily see these encumbrances in any report anyplace as to those things we've approved for appropriations expenditures in 2025, if we revisit them by department when we get a chance, or something on a regular basis, so that the department heads aren't asked to spend a lot of time at it. But I think that's a great idea for us to kind of know what the status is of the material, the more expensive items. So I will see what I can do about that.
Thank you.
I would like to move on unless, Chief Harry, did you have anything else?
Women?
All right. Okay, thank you so much for coming this
My
afternoon.
pleasure.
Director Zan? Thank you. I also want to reassure everybody that from my viewpoint, we're talking about just getting information about these items that are on this budget request. So, and also understanding we are not tapping into the unencumbered funds general 101 in order to make these purchases
For the additional,
for the addition.
there was and continues to be capital from 101 in the original budget that was provided to council both in November and once that was rejected in the appropriations ordinance that was introduced in January as well.
So the capital expenditures that were like 4 million from
Yes, 4.4, I think.
your budget book end of 2024, that's coming from unencumbered,
Not, well,
101.
so 4.4 million of capital improvement comes from a variety of different sources, but we've got Fund 606, we've got Fund 411, we've got Fund 231, we've got Fund 228, 226, 225, 222, 214, 208, 201, and then some that are 101. And that current tab, the current versus additional on the printout indicates what funds the capital expenditure is being requested from. So for instance, you've got housing inspections, computer software, fire prevention, computer hardware that are being funded out of 101. So there is some that is currently in the appropriations ordinance that indicates, and that you can see it on the capital request toward the top. There are, I don't know, what is that, 10 or 12 items.
Which we could subtotal and add those together.
It looks like it's just over 170,000.
Yeah, it's not a great deal of money.
Say it again, Mr. Ed, please.
Looks like it's just over 170,000. 171,550.
Okay.
Now, if council wanted to do something else with that, I suppose we could entertain that and take that out of a different fund. I'm not sure that it's all that important either way, though.
I think it's less than material at this point. Counselor Posh?
Okay, just for clarity, so the current items that are in the current set of appropriations is basically 4.4 million for capital items. And we have approximately 9.1 additional items that are marked as additional items on pages 2 and 3 of this report.
1, 2, and 3. Or at least 1 and 2. I think the
Well,
additional.
I'm going by the page numbers I'm going by are by Addie's, the packet.
Okay.
Okay. Director Zan. The budget requests is for $150,000 for street construction, maintenance, annual street surfacing, road engineering, using the Safe Streets for Cleveland Heights demo grant. Do you have a list available to council of the 2025 targeted streets for that grant money?
So the 150,000 is really for the engineering to implement both the active transportation plan and the safe streets for Cleveland Heights.
Okay,
I know it says demonstration grant here, but it's really for
I was gonna ask for,
all of the implementation.
okay, thank you.
And that's just the engineering design. So we do have some priority projects listed in both of those plans, but we have yet to say these are the 4, the 5, the 6 that we're going to do. That will come, I think, after we adopt the first CSAP, which should come up here in the next month or so.
So we would be able to access detail then?
Yeah.
Okay.
And that will be presented to council, right, CSAP?
So at that time, we can talk about where this 150 may go
All
very
right.
specifically.
Thank you. And I'm assuming that the $200,000, which is in the finance capital projects for planning, is our match to the $800,000 grant, correct?
Correct. So those are two totally different things. One is
Yeah.
engineering and one is our match to actually do the demonstration.
Okay. Match for implementation.
Yeah.
I'm glad to hear you clarify that the demonstration, because when I see here demo, I think temporary and it could be pulled anytime and, did it work or not? Yep,
Now,
That
this
sounds
this
like-
could be permanent. Yeah.
okay, thank you. Coventry, traffic calming. The history of that, they asked for $28,000 in their ARPA proposal. They did not get it because we, at that time, agreed that it could be moved over into the budget. And I'm wondering if that Coventry is at least on your radar for looking at traffic calming within the definition of this grant money.
Absolutely, yeah. So about that 200,000 for the demonstration project, which again is going to be more permanent. Coventry is among these roadway segments that we're looking at.
Okay. Work in progress. The budget requests $50,000 for economic development land purchases. Any details you can share about that, or is that just in case?
That's in case we do that every year. I have Assistant Director Anderson here, but that's usually the closing costs to acquire properties,
Okay,
which we're always looking at. So it's a safety net for us, but we don't usually spend it all.
my last question, then I'll open it up to everybody. The budget requests $200,000 for Taylor and Noble Road streetscape improvements and $100,000 for Noble Road private property streetscapes. Do you have any details you can give us on that? Like, are we talking enhanced bike lanes? Are we talking plants? Are we
So in both of these cases, these are outgrowths of the Noble Road revitalization effort and then the ARPA money that you all allocated to us. So we right now have a design team, landscape architecture, Benke Associates working with us to develop a plan and then designs for both public and private streetscape improvements. And Sharon is sort of leading that effort. But that's gonna lead to what we wanna do is be able to provide funding so people could implement those designs. So think about the Noble Road Library and those wonderful spaces that they have outside, which is private property. This would allow private property owners, apartment buildings to implement some of that funding.
so they can apply for it?
They would, be able to do that. And then also some funding for us to do on our own property on the streetscape. So it wouldn't necessarily be bike lanes, but it's more of, landscaping and placemaking through plazas.
Councilor Posh, do you have any questions?
Yes, so I'm looking at, and I'm just looking for clarity on where some of these numbers sit. So I'm looking at the presentation that was given to council when the 2025 capital requests were actually made back in November. And the, make sure I got the right numbers here before I speak. So we had $438,000 worth of capital requests, and I didn't necessarily do all the math, but that is still included in what is the current amounts that is in, that was presented to us of the 4.4 million. 38 of capital items from November 2025 that was presented for this year's budget. Those are all included. Is that correct? You can get back to me on it. You don't have the papers here in front of me.
From what I remember, and correct me if I'm wrong, so there's a longer list that was included that included a lot of accessibility improvements that are not included here, but I don't think were included as part of that 400,000. And we're looking at alternative ways to try to fund those things. But we should clarify if that 400K matches.
Well, let me make another point of this. So originally, the expectation of the administration was that we could provide a larger universe of possible projects, equipment, so on and so forth, and then work with council in a collaborative conversation to prioritize what we would go for in 2025. Again, going back to that conversation, that particular approach was not, I don't know exactly how best to say it, was not welcomed. And so I got the message, council sent a message very clearly that that sort of collaborative approach in this context was not the way that council wanted to operate. And so, that list of a variety of different things was not whittled down with council, was not prioritized in collaboration with council. I took the message, I got the message, and so we went back and made determinations administratively about what we are willing to pursue in 2025, and this is the list. Anything that's not on this list, we won't be pursuing.
Okay.
Councilor Petrus.
Thank you. I am so happy that we received the grant from the U.S. Department of Transportation. Is the plan for that 800,000 plus the 200,000 for matching and the 150 for the demonstration projects, is the hope that that would all be spent in 25, or would that be spread over a couple years?
The hope is that it's spent in 2025.
Okay.
Now, that all depends on the federal government, to be honest.
Right.
And their schedule, but that was our intention.
Okay. Do we think that it's realistic that we'd have the capacity to do all of those projects?
So
I guess my interest in asking is that this is a real area of interest. People continue to be struck by cars in different neighborhoods. And I'm really happy about us dipping our toes in the water with the speed tables, the Compton Road Greenway. But if we have 1.1 million, I'm really happy to see that, but just want to have confidence that we're actually able to use it.
So a big part of the 1 million, 800 and 200 is that we would not only hire a consultant to help us walk through the process, but also to assist in the installation.
Okay.
So we know that we didn't want to put a tremendous burden on our public works folks. So that's why we feel pretty confident that, again, should the federal government be timely, we would be able to do it this year.
Thank you.
Councilor Cobb.
I'm good, thank you.
Mr. Ike?
Good.
Great. That closes out our questions for you, Director Zanf. Thank you so much for coming up. We do some general discussion questions for Mayor Sarin. Thank you, everyone. Appreciate you. We were talking about ordinance 011-2025, which is the written requests. Are you gonna be adding these additional items to that ordinance?
Yes,
Okay, and when will you be doing that? So we
my
can go.
expectation is today. As long as council is fine with making an amendment tonight. Tonight is when it would have to happen. That's what we
Patty?
discussed the last time.
Where are we at?
Okay, so it was my understanding, obviously I was not at the last meeting, but it was my understanding that those would be given and the amended version would be on the agenda tonight. It is not on the agenda tonight because I never received them.
An amended version
of the already introduced piece.
Right, and we're not expecting to do it that way. My expectation was that on the floor, it would be moved to amend by substitution.
Okay, that was an option, that was not what I understood to be what was going to happen, so that can be done.
Yeah.
That's just not what I was expecting, so we will have to do some work tonight.
Because what the committee did was move it back to council for
that purpose.
that purpose,
Sure.
yes, so go ahead, then I need to get back to
Granted,
Ed.
I was on Zoom, out of state, but a question that came to mind was why that was necessary. It seemed like it would be a better process if we were to talk through all of these items and settle on a list and then attach that to the legislation, rather attaching this list to the legislation and then the possibility of this list being changed and then having to do it again. So,
I responded to that at the last meeting, and I can repeat. This is the list that the administration is putting forward. Obviously, like I said earlier, the approach that I thought was a reasonable approach in December and November was not the approach that council wanted to take, that more collaborative front-end approach. And so this is the list that the administration is putting forward. This is the list that we are committing to. If council or any council member wishes to remove something or amend the items out, council is capable of doing that. But I think the approach of sort of having some sort of conversation now about which are and which are not appropriate to be included in the submission from the mayor to the council. I think at this point, we've got a submission, this is what I'm submitting. And if council so chooses, it can decide that some of these, and that's one of the reasons why I wanted to ask council members their impression about any particular item on this list. Because if there was something that many council members were against, then I could have a preview into whether or not council is going to amend something out and sort of prepare for that both practically and emotionally. But the idea that this is the submission from the mayor to the council, and that's why. Instead of taking a longer period of time to go through some collaborative effort with the council and a particular approach that was rejected last year by the council, I think I'm putting this forward, and then council can have its process to determine whether or not it will approve funding for any particular item. Council still has that opportunity, and I'm sure council will go through that process as it sees fit.
So where we are as of last committee meeting is I thought you were gonna put it up for reading tonight,
That is,
which would
yes,
be a second reading,
second reading,
second reading.
and then a request for amendment.
request for amendment.
Yeah.
And then we would get it back in committee to complete our discussions once we have the financials. Because we don't have the financials for the end of year end 2024. That's a request that we've been waiting for a long time. And Director Hairston has told us we will have that Monday, the 24th. So tonight, I'm happy to do what we just talked about.
Thank you.
I just need to know if you can give me the wording, Addie, when we leave here, because we'll be done shortly.
I've got that handled.
Oh, you got?
Yeah,
Okay,
don't worry about it.
all right. So, Councilor Maddox is gonna do that for us?
I don't know.
Oh, okay.
Is that what you would prefer?
No, I just wanna make sure that we do what we just talked about. Somebody is assigned that
I have not
process.
spoken to any particular council member about this, but if
The
you would like to move for amendment by substitution, I can provide it to you. I don't really have a particular preference either way.
Yeah, if you wanna email me that wording, then I'll make sure that I do it correctly.
But it will reflect the submission that we've provided.
Yes. Addie, are we okay, second reading,
It'll have to be amended agenda, so I'll have
amended
to make
agenda?
that, I'll talk to.
Wait, is it not on the agenda for second
No,
reading?
because my understanding was that I would be getting, it would be on the agenda as amended.
Oh, see,
So
that
that's where the confusion
in
was.
and of itself, that is problematic from a legal perspective.
Okay, because I had talked to Bill and I thought that that was understood as being.
It's previous practice in Cleveland Heights, but it has been the wrong practice every single time. So the way that amendments are supposed to work in Cleveland Heights is that an amendment must be made in a council meeting. It can't be made prior to a council meeting, as in it can't be made in committee. And every single time, the city manager, back when I was on council, would just sort of put an amended version. It was just sort of allowing something to happen that really isn't spelled out in the rules of council. And so making a formal amendment to a piece of legislation most optimally should not be done sort of informally by addition on an agenda without making a formal motion to amend.
Well, but we were just asking to get that ordinance on the agenda tonight, but tonight we wanted to do that, sir. So it was just a breakdown of communications and nobody's to be faulted for it, and we'll make sure that it gets done this evening. Councilor Posh.
I don't think it is necessary to have it done this evening, especially if it's not on the agenda. I mean, from my perspective, until we see the full packet, all the financials, all the things that we've asked for. I mean, we have a bunch of piecemeal stuff that we have that we're looking at on a piecemeal basis, but we need to be looking at the big picture. That's really what I feel our role is. So whether it gets on the agenda tonight or not, I don't think it's necessary, but if that's what everybody wants to do.
Well, I'm gonna make
Go
a
ahead.
request that it be either added to the agenda on the floor this evening, and then we can have the opportunity to amend by substitution to add the things that are on this list. And if council chooses not to do that, that's council's choice. I
So
think that it would move us forward in a way that is more concrete and will show the full picture of the administration's request for the council for 2025.
So do you have, would we be adding like this spreadsheet, or would it be broken down by operating cost centers?
No, this would be an amendment by substitution of the exhibit that is attached to the appropriation ordinance that's currently before council. So this is detail that will not exist in the legislation. This is detail for council's understanding only. In the legislation, we've got an appropriations ordinance. That appropriations ordinance is broken up by fund, department, and object.
Right.
And in that way, we will have an amended exhibit that will show the difference in the capital in each of these funds and departments.
So it is merely an exhibit then?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Councilor Petrus.
Okay, I remember hearing that the Vector truck is something that we would be reimbursed for.
Correct.
Are there other items in here that we would be reimbursed for?
Yes.
Can you tell us which ones they are or indicated in here somehow so that
can.
we're aware?
My expectation is that through the course of the conversation with the directors, they would provide you that information. And so Public Works would be telling you about the, sewer district reimbursement through community cost share for the Vector truck. We would also be taking a look at the water line replacements and the work that would be done that would be reimbursed by Cleveland Water for Altamont. But I was expecting to leave that to your conversation with the directors.
I guess, so for the three who we talked with today, were any of those items going to be reimbursed through other source? Okay.
Except for the 800,000 that you already got
Well,
for the planning, so,
Right.
okay,
that's a reimbursement.
Of course.
yeah.
I have to ask Mayor Sarin, because I do every year. Have you included chairs for the council chambers and the executive conference room in the budget?
Not specifically, no, but that is more a larger city hall project than it is specific to a particular room or couple rooms. So we do have money in our proposal for a redo of the furniture in this building. But it is not specifically called out as chairs for chambers.
Carpeting out in the atrium and those kinds of things that are looking worn.
Are you talking about sort of I don't want to get into the very specific.
I'm just, so that would be a project that I would like to track as something that I really like to see some of this done in 2025 if possible. Go ahead.
That was the chairs in particular was something that was budgeted for in December of '23. And so I would just like to put out there the suggestion that maybe council pay for it, that maybe we add it as a line item for ourselves and engage Addie to make that purchase so that we can make sure that it happens. People are coming to our meetings all the time talking about how uncomfortable the chairs are, and I don't want another year to go by without that seemingly small purchase not being made.
We can talk about that in committee of the whole. Mayor Sarin, have you included any expenditures for implementation of the climate resiliency plan in the 2025 budget?
I don't think that we have any particular estimates for any particular expenses for that. So with the exception of continuing along a path of replacing old fuel inefficient police interceptors and cruisers with new hybrids, with the exception of obviously the Leopardo work that is intended to reduce our energy consumption here in this building and others. There are things that we will be doing on a continuous basis that will be along those lines because that's our focus. Our focus is to adhere to that and those goals. But no, nothing in particular specific to that and the CARP has not been finalized or released just yet as a final document either.
All right, thank you. What we need to do as council, if there's an item that you want to have council consider, we'll have to get the cost estimates together. We'll have to project, when we want to do it, we can decide, once we get the unencumbered balance for year end of General Fund 101, there's money in there for something like that. And council can make an amendment. We can do a piece of legislation that will allow us to support the initiatives that we want, like the composting project that I'll be talking about tomorrow. So that's where I'm headed, is that we may have some things we want to add. Okay? Any other questions?
I have a
Mr.
question.
Wright.
So while the fire chief was in here, he talked about the fire engine. I got a little confused, but we were kind of, I think, over our time, so I wanted to wait, and I don't think he needs to be here. He's talking about potentially being purchased or something. Can anyone elaborate a little bit more on that? What he meant by what the paperwork went through?
We'll have to double check that. So that's something that I know that we were scrambling furiously at the end of the year, both on the ARPA allocations that council made and a variety of other contracting, since we knew that council had rejected a year-long budget and instead passed a 3-month budget. There was a lot of work that was being done sort of in a flurry at the end of the year to attempt to get certain things taken care of in 2024 because we couldn't be certain about what council was going to do for 2025. So we'll have to take a look and double check. It was a relatively frenetic, hectic time, which I imagine you can imagine. And so we'll have to double check that and make sure that that's not a holdover from, previous. I don't think that the damage is all that severe if it has been purchased. But if it has not, then it's in the request. If we were able to finalize those documents at the end of the year, we can double check to make sure that that all went through. Because at this point, I don't think anybody in the room is sure about that.
Well, and the thing of it is, we did remove it. We authorized removing it from the 2024 budget. And then if it got purchased, wouldn't we have seen a piece of legislation for that?
Well, we'd have to take a look at exactly what you removed from the 2024 budget and through what mechanism. You could take me back to that.
Yeah. Maybe Craig's already looking at it. Council Cobb.
Yeah, a second ago, we took it out. Give me one second.
While everybody's looking, can I ask a question?
Go ahead, Councilor Fox.
Is there other transactions that we have to retroactively approve for 2024?
No.
If I'm reading this correctly, this budget adjustment, is that the fire truck there,
You removed how much
1,060,000.
from Fund 402?
Does it say an ordinance number on top of that? Does it say an ordinance number on the top of that?
230.
230.
Yeah, so removed, so obviously, I'm having, we'll have to get back to you. I'll have the director take a look at that
Thank you.
just to make sure. My expectation though is, one way or another, either this will be included this evening, possibly removed, and hopefully we'll have that information for you before we make that amendment this evening.
Okay, that'd be great, thank you. Mr. Ike?
I guess kind of building off of that, are there any other transactions that may have happened around year end in the frenetic pace of closing out the year that there could be duplicate additions in this capital budget that have already been taken care of?
Could be. I suppose we would have to take a look and make sure, and look through all of the transactions at the end of the year. I know that I was, in addition to signing a bunch of contracts, I was also trying to put together a document for council at the very end of the night on December 31st that would indicate certain transfers into funds that required them, because council required that a report be provided on the 31st of December. Unfortunately, that's before the books close, but we were able to provide that document to council. We've got a little bit more information to provide to council that will be when you see the end of year financials.
Because we did approve that transfer, we just
Up to
didn't
10
have,
million.
we couldn't see the transfer.
Yep.
And so you've indicated that you have additional
Oh, yeah,
out of intos that we haven't seen yet, so.
correct.
looking
And
for those.
that's, I think what we're waiting for is the closeout and the
Okay.
financials that you guys are looking for as well.
Okay. Counselor Posh?
Well, my hand wasn't up, but I do have, I wish it
Your
was, I
face.
suppose. I guess we're sort of under the general discussion and the other, right now, I mean, we're,
Yeah, I need to
So-
pull this meeting to an end as well.
so I am, my expectation is we're getting everything that we've asked for by the 24th. Is that everybody else's expectation?
I don't know about a budget book.
Well, tell me about a budget book. You want what we call a clean budget book, right? I don't know what clean means, but what I'm trying to provide and what I've thus far provided on the website is the information related to the all funds, the general fund specifically, the capital requests, the personnel staffing levels have not changed. And the last thing that needs to be provided according to previous practice here in Cleveland Heights and the budget book for fiscal year 2024 is a department by department breakdown.
You can understand, we're sitting here shuffling papers and spreadsheets right now, and we don't have that by department
Mhm.
summary, and it's been very difficult to make sure that we get all our questions asked, so that kind of analysis, that would be a revised budget book, doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be on
It's not
graphic, all the
going to be
graphics.
fancy. Absolutely.
We're just looking to see all of these things consolidated by department and then your general. Counselor Petrus.
I'm sorry, when you're finished, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Right, I'm done, thanks.
And during the last meeting, Mr. Aish mentioned some sort of guidance on which funds go into each of those departments. I agree that would be very helpful so that people can understand when looking at the appropriations ordinance in the budget book, how to reconcile them in their heads.
Okay,
My expectation is this is the 2024 budget. This fell short at the end of last year because we didn't get this last year in November. This is what I'm looking for. It doesn't have to be formatted like this, but in my opinion, it needs to have the same information that
So
this happened in 2024, we need to have the same thing for 2025. And it's not only for us, it's for the community.
a little bit of information about that, though. I do want to express that in 2023, when we were producing a 2024 budget book, we were using projected numbers. We were using estimates for projects. We were using information that then was amended 32 times by council over the course of 2024. That's first, I think in part, and we were not looking at end of November or end of December numbers for our financials either. So I want to point out that particular stark difference. Additionally, in 2024, when we provided that initial summary of, all funds, general fund, and then proceeded to provide additional information throughout the course of the budget hearings, the departmental breakdowns were included in those in the same, basically the same form as in the 2024 budget book. All of the information that is provided in the 2024 budget book about the financials, each fund, each department was provided to council in the 2024 process that we went through. Reconstructing that department by department breakdown is sort of the last piece of that for this new appropriations ordinance. Most of it will not be different because the staffing levels are the same. We did not adjust the addition of the capital in each of these. You have more detail about the capital than, appear in those department by department breakdowns. And I've even provided the capital as a operating department breakdown as well for the additional. And on that spreadsheet, you can see, and I recognize that council would like to see sort of a more consolidated approach, and we're working through that right now, and we'll get that to you. The department by department breakdown is an operating department breakdown, not a accounting department breakdown. We've got many more accounting departments than we have operating departments. And so, putting that together and finding that way to roll it up. Now, we did provide a great deal of information to council last year, extremely detailed information about personnel costs, other than personnel costs, that is very well broken down and detailed. I don't know if council members have had a chance to pour through that or not. Much of that won't change. Much of that hasn't changed.
In November?
Oh, it is an extremely, it's not, the budget book is simplified. The budget book is intended to be more digestible. The information that I provided to council last year was much more detailed, much more robust, and specific to each fund and even the non-operating departments that we have in our budgetary system. Again, I don't know whether or not that information was useful to council. We didn't really discuss it after it was provided. So I don't know how council members viewed that detailed information or not. But maybe that's something that can be sent again with the
Well, you
new
have it posted on
appropriation.
the website.
Well, we have some of that, not all of the stuff that we provided to council. Council got a lot more stuff that we did not actually post because it wasn't a part of the budget. So it was additional information that council requested.
I'm gonna reiterate, it doesn't have to be formatted like this, but the data that we see in here, categorized and displayed by department is what I'm looking for. Not a form that is, I believe it was a 60-some page document you're referring to, that had departmental information across many different funds.
That was one of them. But the other ones that are currently on the website are the presentations that contain the same financial information department by department as presented last November. So in those departmental presentations, the same information was provided to council. It just wasn't in the same form. I'll give you a good example. So this is 2025. This is 2024. What you'll see here is.
Does that include your amended list of
No,
capital?
this is from the previous. projects, the previous appropriations ordinance. So for instance, capital requests for information services budget. This was provided to council throughout the course of the budgetary hearings. It mirrors the information that you would find in the 2024 budget book. It just was in a different format. But collecting the initial.
You're asking for that to be updated to reflect the discussions that we've had
I'm not
since
talking
then.
about that, but I'm talking about just wanting to make sure that the record reflects that the administration actually did provide the financial information department by department in the same way that we provided it, with the exception of the form. The functional information was provided, and I just wanted to make sure that everybody was cognizant of that.
I would like to see myself have this information included in a format that is by department. Because I'm retired, I can take hours to go through this and pick out the ones that are IT, the ones that are DPW, whatever, were they on the 2024 budget and drop whatever. But we have working folks here, so that's what we've been asking for by department. And I need to wrap this up, sir, so
Of course.
if it's okay, we'll reconvene at committee of the whole. Everybody okay if I adjourn at this, we have another meeting tomorrow on the 20th at 2:00, and we'll be discussing the capital requests for Parks and Rec, Police, and Public Works. So that will put an end to council's opportunity to ask questions about the capital requests.
If I might, I just want to say that from the administration's perspective, we would prefer more and more frequent conversation about this than less. And so from my perspective, I don't believe that it should be, and I don't believe that it has to be, the last opportunity to discuss these capital requests. We have a particular timeline where the state will look at us with a particular lens if council decides not to pass a budget. However, I am firm in my opinion, I guess, it's a particular informed opinion, that what we will be amending into the record tonight is a perfectly appropriate budget for council to pass tonight. I don't think that there is any reason for council not to. I know that individual council members have their own particular reasons, and you're entitled to have them. But I believe that what we will be amending into the record tonight, the addition of the capital expenses into the 2025 appropriations ordinance, is perfectly acceptable for council to pass. And if there are any other changes that need to take place, then council can, and I'm sure it will, throughout the course of 2025, make whatever adjustments it sees fit as the needs require.
I appreciate your opinion. I also would like to add that we want to have the information we've been requesting since January. And as we're looking forward to the 24th to have the year-end reports, the financial statements, that's where we're at, Mayor. And I hope to have all this pulled together through another meeting scheduled next week to talk about the 2024 year-end financials with Director Hairston. And I would like to be able to put the budget, your appropriations budget, on for third reading on March 3rd so that we can take a vote on it at that point. So that's where I'm at. And I'll talk to Addie afterwards and make sure that I present this the right way.
Well, I'll provide you with the information that you need.
Thank you.
Yep.
And at this point, I'm gonna adjourn this meeting at 5:09. Thank you, everyone.